afternoon, everyone. My name is Casey Amaya. I'm Pi Sigma Alpha Chapter President. Today I want to introduce somebody very special, a good friend of mine, Carolina Marmore-Grosso. She is an international business and pre-law student here at FIU. Carolina is from Santa Cruz, Bolivia. She is a pro-democracy activist and has been involved in all the events faced by the Bolivian population since the election of October 20th, 2019. Carolina conducted a variety of initiatives to unite Bolivians around the world in their fight for democracy. By creating a platform of dissemination of truthful information, she was also active through interviews and news channels and radio programs. She is here today to explain how democracy degraded in her country up to the point almost entering a full dictatorship, had it not been for the people's brave and timely reaction. Also among us is Carolina Grosso, Carolina's mom, who is visiting from Bolivia for her daughter's graduation. She is an international lawyer with postgraduate degrees from Harvard Law School and Ohio University. Her work experience was mainly developed in the international oil and gas industry. She lived through the entire process that will be presented by Carolina. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you so very much for being here, and thank you also for being interested in learning about Bolivia and everything that happened in the events that led us to what we're living today. I will be describing, as Casey explained, a little bit of the process Bolivia went through to get to the turmoil it got to and how it is in its process of recovery currently and recapturing its democracy. So, actually, is there a clicker? That would be wonderful. Okay, great. So now going into kind of the contents of this presentation I will be making, we will make an overview of Bolivia in the past to understand what led us to this point. We'll look at the background of the political situation, so what led Evo Morales to the 14 years of rule, almost. And then the abrasions to democracy, environmental destructions, because that caused a lot of unrest as well, previous to Evo Morales trying to stay further. We will look into the authoritarianism within the government and what they did to the population in different areas. And we will look, of course, at the presidential election of 2019, the fraud that occurred, the proven fraud, so what the OAS declared, and, of course, the resistance and peaceful protests across all of Bolivia, which allowed the democracy to come back and which allowed for the dictator to basically resign and leave, which was Evo Morales. So we will also be looking at systematic state violence and how this grew throughout the days of tension, and the democracy's success at the end. So just a little background for anyone that may not know, Bolivia, or just to refresh, Bolivia is in South America. It's in the heart of South America. It's one of the 2 landlocked countries in South America. And if you observe now this slide, so as you see it right there, its area is 10,988,000 kilometers squared. It's the 5th largest country in South America, and its major cities are La Paz, Santa Cruz, and Cochabamba, which are quite important to remember because we will be seeing how the government, or the past government, ex-government, tried to mainly attack these particular cities to cause the most amount of damage possible. Now, observing demographics, we have about 11.5 million people. Our languages, our main language is Spanish. However, we do have 36 recognized indigenous languages, among which are Quechua, Aymara, and Guarani as the 3 largest ones. So we have a very dense indigenous population. And this is Bolivia. So the topography of Bolivia is also quite important because the most kind of like peaceful areas were towards the side, which is Santa Cruz, and the most tension was in Cochabamba and La Paz, so where the government is and one of the largest cities as well. Now, observing the economy, just to give a little bit of a background, Bolivia mainly focuses on petroleum and gases, but has been diversifying a lot lately. So we see that we've also always had a big like mining section, so with zinc, lead, ores and precious metals, etc. And Bolivia has the world's largest proven reserves of lithium. So this is an area that is getting very explored lately, and Bolivia is trying to really enter this type of market. So that's something to also remember and consider, because that gives also the importance to the control of Bolivia and such. And other sectors have been expanding as well. Now, observing the government and the distribution of powers, Bolivia has a unitary presidential constitutional republic. It's divided into 3 branches of power, so the executive, legislative, and judicial powers. And this is important to remember as well, because as time progressed, the government truly started taking control of each of these branches and diminished the separation of powers. And that allowed them to really do anything they wanted without any repercussions. Now, observing Evo Morales and his era of 14 years of rule, which is one of the longest terms of any person in power in Bolivia and in South America, actually. So in 2006, Evo Morales first went in and was elected under the old constitution. So he had his first term for 4 years. During this first term, he actually did quite a lot of good initiatives. He implemented social programs, he improved the minimum wages for the workers, he did a lot of kind of inclusion programs for the indigenous people and masses that had been marginalized for very long. So these things really helped his popularity boost, and people really did appreciate him at that time, and people from all social strata, because we knew that these were problems that had to be dealt with and had to be improved for Bolivia to progress and to evolve. So then he was re-elected for his second term. In 2010, he entered his second term, and in this second term, things started to change. He started to change legislations to his benefit and to his kind of group's benefits. He started to take control further of the 3 branches of government, so the executive, legislative, and judicial powers. And he also changed the Constitution. So he changed the Constitution to make presidential terms 5 years each. And he also expelled the DEA, so the Drug Enforcement Agency, and the US ambassador from Bolivia. So that was a bit of a shock, and people started questioning what was truly going on. So here we can start to observe the authoritarian rule he started to implement throughout the country. He had very harsh measures against any opposition. There were persecutions, numerous people became exiled, there were killings that were kind of covered, people were jailed for no reason, truly, if they said something or did something that was against the government, etc. And he even started forgetting the indigenous populations that he previously talked about and promoted so much. So he started not doing the promises he said to them and violating whatever implementations he did previously. So there's also a first-hand example, which I'd like to speak about later. My mom's a very good, actually, childhood friend who worked all her life with social justice and inclusion of indigenous people. She really dedicated her life to that. So she entered a sector which observed corruption. And so she found a lot of proof of corruption within government officials, and she started proving that. And the next thing that happened to her was that she was jailed for really no reason. She was, the justice system doesn't really function. At that point already, it didn't function anymore. It was all led by the government and their officials. So she's actually still in jail currently, and we're hoping that with this new government that came in, the interim government, she'll be able to get out, because they jailed her without any proof of facts. Now, continuing with the 14 years of one man's rule, he entered a 3rd consecutive term, which was already an illegal term, in 2015. So, since he changed the Constitution in his second term, he claimed that the new term, the 3rd one, only counted as his second one, making it legal constitutionally. Because since he changed the Constitution, he claimed that this was only his second term, because the first term was under the original or old Constitution. So that was already something that the Bolivian population was not happy about, and they really started to question it. And his 3rd consecutive term violated his own article, which was Article 168. This truly demonstrated the first evident kind of backslide on democracy, as he was completely trampling on the Constitution. and the laws of the country. So the new constitution, which he implemented, added the Article 168, so that the president and vice president could only be re-elected once. So we all thought this second term under the new constitution would be the last one for them. And this was not the case as he ran again in 2019, and that's why the unrest happened. And so in the new constitution also, he changed the 4-year length of mandates to 5 years, so they were longer. And he also changed the name of the country from the Republic of Bolivia to the plurinational state of Bolivia. Now, observing 2016, February 21st of 2016, Evo truly displayed his wish to stay in power indefinitely. And this was shown to the entire Bolivian population as he did this national referendum pleading to modify the Article 168, which he had implemented. And the question was to the voters if they agreed to remove limits of terms in power for the president and vice president. So he wished to remove that and to be able to just stay in power endlessly through. So the majority of the population voted no. There was a 51% majority that voted no. And he claimed that regardless of the results, he was going to run and continue forward regardless. So this really marked the beginning of the pro-democracy movements across the entire nation. Mobilization started in 2016 actually, and people all over the nation started rallying and protesting peacefully and making this movement that we called 21F, 21st of February, where Bolivia said no. And this was a cry that continued throughout the years until recently, until 2019. People were still saying, Bolivia dijo no, Bolivia said no. And so how could he run again? And he just got rid of the referendum's results, and he actually went another way that he could justify him running again in 2019. So as I mentioned previously, the executive power truly started controlling everything. So this caricature actually, I think, displays it quite well because they truly mutilated the judicial and legislative powers. So Evo Morales slowly seized control of absolutely all government branches. He controlled 100% of powers by the end of this time. There was a higher than 75% majority in both houses of parliament, and the Supreme Court even had appointed judges handpicked by Evo Morales, basically. So his justification to run again in 2019 was that he went to the Supreme Court and claimed it was his natural human right to run again, regardless of the Constitution. So, of course, since the Supreme Court had the picked judges he decided to put there, they agreed with him, and they put the decree that indeed it was his natural human right to run again. And that just eliminated the referendum. It silenced all of the Bolivian voters' voices of the 51% that voted no for him to run again, etc. And honestly, at that point, justice, democracy, and freedom truly deteriorated. Now, I just wanted to touch upon a few of the environmental destructions that were almost made, that were made by this government, this ex-government, because this also caused a lot of the unhappiness of the Bolivians and the indigenous people as well. So Evo Morales, his whole time in power, always talked about the Pachamama. The Pachamama is the Mother Earth, and for the indigenous population, Pachamama is like their god. It's something that is so sacred and so special that it cannot be trampled on or messed with, basically. So he always talked about the environment, protecting it, etc., protecting the indigenous people. And in 2011 already, he decided to make an immense road that was going to go through a protected area, a national reserve, in which a lot of indigenous tribes lived, and they were originary from those locations. So these are the people from the Tiknis, where the road was going to be. They marched about 800 kilometers by foot to La Paz to protest this road they were going to build. And Evo Morales did not even receive them. He refused to even speak to them because he said he was going to make the road regardless. So that already was a huge detriment to the environment and to the morale of the society the indigenous people at that point started realizing that he's not truly a protector of their beliefs. So that was quite shocking to them. And in 2019, I hope you guys heard about the forest fires of the Amazon. So it wasn't only in Brazil, it was actually in Bolivia massively. Like, I think almost half of Bolivia was truly burning. 5 million hectares are completely destroyed to this date. And there were more than 2 months of fires, actually. And Evo Morales refused to declare a national emergency. He refused to let in, foreign aid, international help. And even today, the government, the current government, found, for example, in the customs, they found 2 containers filled with supplies that were sent to the people that were affected by the fires from Australia, that were never given to the people. And this is not the only case. They also stopped, supplies that were sent from the U.S. We raised money here in Miami and across the world to buy supplies for the volunteers, because it was volunteers that were fighting the fires. Volunteers, people, just civilians, were going out there to stop the fires. And so many supplies were sent to them, and the government did not help. So that was just something that caused huge unrest, because that was in 2019, before the election. So people were already protesting highly, and Evo's popularity really diminished after that. So this brings us to the 2019 election, October 21st. So Evo Morales ran, as I mentioned, as an unconstitutional candidate. He disobeyed the constitution he made, and he even altered already the constitution, yet he disobeyed it. He disobeyed the referendum, he trampled on that, and he claimed it was his natural human right to do so. So in this election, not only did he run, but he also conducted and orchestrated, his party orchestrated a massive fraud, which we all saw. And the Bolivians within Bolivia saw, videotaped, and I have a few videos to show, because many people always ask me, how can the fraud be so proven? Or how are you so sure? Well, the fraud, for example, in this picture, they found boxes of ballots in which, all the papers, the ballots inside, were for Evo Morales. And so they were using, they were replacing boxes, they were opening the ballot boxes, like unsealing them and changing the votes inside. And there are videos of all of this.
Didn't they say, it was like the U.S., observing the elections, didn't they say it was, so obvious?
Yes, exactly.
It was so obvious he didn't even need us.
Right. It was so obvious, exactly. The thing is, though, the government kept refusing to acknowledge it. So they kept saying, no, it was not obvious, it's not true. And that's why we really had to get a confirmation from the OAS, which happened later, and that truly caused Evo's resignation.
I think you have to point out that we had international observers throughout the whole process of the voting, of the election. There was the OAS with a mission of observers, there was the EU with a mission of observers, and there were different countries also with missions of observers. So the election was observed internationally extremely strongly. And what happened, I don't know, I think you want to talk about that when they stopped the trip.
Right.
I think you'll get to that.
I will, yeah, don't worry. But yes, exactly. So this massive fraud was truly an attempt to enter a complete dictatorship. Following the fraud and following people's unrest after they saw with their own eyes what was truly going on in the streets, because the thing is, the people that were paid to, for example, carry the ballots from one place to another, the people that were supposed to be the electoral kind of observers, or the people that were working for the TREP, which is the official electoral counting agency in Bolivia, which is a government-led agency actually. So those people themselves were found in the cars transporting the ballots, were found to be opening the boxes, unsealing them, changing them, or using fake boxes and leaving the real ones behind. Following the protests, I have friends that actually found in massive garbages, because the cities were completely blocked at the end. But during that time, friends of mine told me that they found real ballot boxes with votes for the opposition, which was Mesa mainly, and they were just there sitting and they had never been counted. So that means they had used fake ones instead of those, for example. So moving on, so this presidential election was really a disaster, and previous to it, the entire population of Bolivia knew that there was going to be a huge fraud. And we knew, of course, that Evo Morales was following the steps of Venezuela, in which they also did immense fraudulent activities to make Maduro stay in power. It was a disaster there too. So we were aware that that was very probable to happen in Bolivia as well. So the population agreed to vote for the main opposition, which was Mesa. And throughout the entire process, there were so many irregularities and in the scrutiny of counting the votes. So the fraud was evident and massive. And for example, once the quick count was performed, suddenly the official counting agency stopped the electoral count for about 24 hours. So the system suddenly fell. And they later interviewed people who worked there, and they said it was odd because the system couldn't have fallen unless there was human intervention. So the system did not fall due to technological problems, because it's impossible for technology to fail that long and to fail in that way. They really attested that it was a human intervention for the system to fall, as it did. So on top of that, the OAS and the EU, who had been observing the process, they said that truly there were too many irregularities, and the process had to be further observed and scrutinally investigated, exactly. So here there's a video of the fraud examples. These are some ballot boxes they found that they were about to use, and they were all for Evo Morales. I don't know if you can play it. Yeah, right there. So this was in La Paz. And people were so angry, and everything was for Evo. All of them, the video's not too clear on the screen, but everything was like, the blue is Evo's party. So all the candidates were voted blue, 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 blue. So that's one example. And there's another one.
And they were going to take that for the recount. So
Yes.
there was going to be a recount, so they were preparing all of that to go for the recount.
Exactly. So that's the thing. They stopped it for 24 hours to have enough time to orchestrate an even bigger fraud. Because it seems the initial fraud they did, which was probably mainly electronically, was not enough. They saw that Mesa was too close, the main opposition was too close to allow Evo to win on the first round, and he wanted to win on the first round. So they stopped 24 hours, and in those 24 hours, the entire country went crazy because they were finding all these ballots. They were stopping the cars that were taking the ballot boxes, and they were finding all the ballot boxes for Evo Morales in locations where people did not want him at all, not even the indigenous people. So it was really terrible. And then the next video is in La Paz. So, oh, they found these in the garbage. The real ones were in the garbage. So in this case, they were protesting outside the main electoral tribunal in La Paz. And that's weird, because it not, I think this Okay, but previous to that, there was one lady that was saying, like, this cannot be, we will end up like Venezuela, we know there was a fraud. And then the other lady shows the ballots she found in the garbage. And those were the real ones because they had the stamps of the tribunal. The fake ones didn't even have stamps. So it was really obvious. So then the next, right, and so the next slide, this was in, okay, so this fraud example is actually in Potosí. So we saw La Paz, we saw one of them in El Alto, and then this is Potosí. In Potosí, Evo had a massive problem with this city and this whole county actually, because he was ready to make a deal with Chinese multinationals and with the Chinese government to basically give away the lithium to a really high percentage and leave hardly any royalties to the county where the lithium is extracted from. So the people of Potosí were extremely angered because they thought, this man has been, claiming that imperialism is bad, that we don't want people to exploit our resources, and okay, now he just changes it and makes it even worse. So it's not the US, but it's China, and they're not even going to leave royalties for us. So they were actually protesting for 20 days previous to the election. They had halted all operations in the main city, Potosí, and they all decided we will not vote for Evo Morales because he's not a protector of us, and there are many indigenous populations there too. And they decided, they would not vote for Evo because they were going to get no benefit from this government and from the extraction of our biggest resource right now, which is found to be the world's largest reserve of lithium. And the country was going to be left with truly very little to work on. So in
Todo lo
this,
que se tiene en este momento.
so they found a private
Aniceto
home
Arce, Germán
that was
Bosch,
surrounded by
Unidad
police
Educativa del 1 de
and
abril,
protected.
Don
And
Bosco,
inside,
todas
yes,
las
these are all
actas
ballot
están acá.
boxes that were sealed. And they were fake ones, ready to be
Santa
counted as
Rosa,
real ones.
Alonso de Ibáñez,
And so
San José.
people, yes, and so he's saying like every county is there. So they had prepared these months before
Que
probably.
vengan a notaria.
And they were just,
Una
because they
notaria
knew
que
they were
se
going to
llama
go.
These are the
se
real
atreven
ones.
venir.
Here is where they brought the real ones.
No, en
These
este
are the
momento
real
ven.
ballots. They hid them, and they used fake ones.
Right.
En este momento nosotros
So,
hacemos
that's
con esta
sorry.
situación, coronel.
So they were
Y si usted
using
quiere
fake
comportarse
ones,
como
and these were the real ones that were hidden in the private home. Yes, that's true. I got it upside down. So the real ones were hidden in a private home.
Estas son vacías.
The private home was surrounded by military and police. And so people started wondering, how strange. Why is this home surrounded? So that's why the mayor of, the civic leader actually of Potosí, he was really brave and he convinced somehow the police to let him through. And as he entered, he started discovering all the real ballots that were there, while the fake ones were already being counted in the tribunal.
Yeah, because what was crazy is that Potosí, which everybody knew would be 100% against Evo. In Potosí, actually, Evo Morales won the election. So all the
100%.
Potosí people were just absolutely crazy. They said, no, they stole our votes.
Yeah.
And then they discovered all their votes sitting in a home.
Yeah. So he won with a huge majority in Potosí when Potosí was obviously completely against him. And they found his private home completely protected by the police, where the real votes were while the fake votes had been counted. So then, moving on. So now, you saw a few of the examples of the fraud, but there are so many more that it's really impossible to show everything. Following that, people of course got extremely angry. They really started protesting all over the country. I think no one slept that night because people were trying to protect their votes for 2 nights actually. People were trying to protect their votes the first night because they knew something was going on. And then the second night was when the results came out and they weren't mad because they couldn't believe what Evo claimed that was his big win with a huge majority. So the outcome was that the fraud was evident. Evo declared himself the winner after 24 hours of just, the system going down. And Bolivia's population completely mobilized nationwide. There were marches, town halls, and they declared an indefinite paralyzation of the country. So a halt of all movement and all operations. So throughout the country, peaceful blockades were instated and they remained that way. The country remained blocked for 21 days. Now, here is another video. This is how people were mobilizing in town halls. This is a friend of mine took this video. So people would gather. And they're screaming, "We're not scared." Because by then, we're not scared. And so many chants allowed them to give people motivation. During these times also, people were protesting, but also the government was ordering the police and other kind of irregular armed groups to attack the protesters who had no arms, because in Bolivia, arms are not legal, so no one has arms. So people were protesting with their flags, and that was it, as you see here. But what really was the morale of the people was that they were not scared, and they were going to protect the democracy until the end. And so here's another example. This was, the previous one was in Santa Cruz. This is in La Paz. Here's the end of our national anthem is to die before bleeding as slaves. And so that was a phrase that was always sung and repeated because, people were ready to do anything just to get our democracy back. Because we've had dictatorships in the past. Bolivia has gone through many dictatorships, awful inflation, awful, economic situations. So we were not ready to go back into any of that. And people were ready to really do anything. And also you may wonder, how come I have all these videos that are not really official news reporting videos? Well, the reason is actually because news in Bolivia is highly censored. So we get our news through WhatsApp, through Instagram, and through Facebook. And that's the only way you can know the truth. Because my mom was telling me, I didn't know this, in Bolivia, in Santa Cruz, for example, when she would turn on the TV, during all this havoc, during all